Have you ever wondered what it really takes for a massive biotechnology company to deliver life-changing medicines and do that while navigating, a really complex financial and regulatory world?
It's quite the tightrope walk, isn't it?
Absolutely. So today we're doing a deep dive into Amgen's second quarter 2025 financial results. They just announced these on August 5th, 2025.
Right. And our info comes straight from the source, Amgen's official news release and their recent SEC Form 10Q filing.
Exactly. And our goal for you, the listener, is to cut through the jargon, unpack the key financials, the product performance, and importantly, those pipeline updates.
We want you to understand not just the numbers, but the stories and the strategy behind them, and what it all means for a leader like Amgen in the biotech space.
Okay, so let's start with the big picture, the overall financials. Amgen reported pretty strong growth, didn't they?
They did. Total revenues climbed 9% to $9.2 billion compared to Q2 last year. Product sales were also up 9%.
So a solid top line. What's really driving that growth? Is it price, volume?
That's the interesting part. It was overwhelmingly volume-driven. We saw a 13% volume growth for product sales.
13% volume. Wow.
Yeah, which is significant. It signals real market adoption, genuine demand for their medicines. They're expanding their reach.
Okay.
Now, this was partially offset by a 3% lower net selling price, which, hints at some ongoing pricing pressures. But still, that volume growth is key.
Right, that makes sense. Strong demand even with some price headwinds. Now, something else that jumped out at me was the GAAP EPS, a huge increase, 92% from $1.38 up to $2.65. What's behind such a big leap?
Well, that headline number, it really ties back directly to those higher revenues we just talked about. It shows good operational leverage.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just EPS. GAAP operating income also saw a big jump from $1.9 billion to $2.7 billion.
Okay.
That pushed their GAAP operating margin up 6.6 percentage points to 30.3%.
So improvements across the board there on the GAAP side. What about non-GAAP? Sometimes that gives a clearer picture of the core business.
Good point. Non-GAAP EPS was also strong, up 21% from $4.97 to $6.02. Again, mainly driven by higher revenues, though, partially offset by some higher operating expenses.
Right.
And non-GAAP operating income climbed, too, from $3.9 billion to $4.3 billion, and the non-GAAP operating margin ticked up slightly, about 0.7 percentage points, to 48.9%. So, yeah, a picture of overall financial health.
Okay, healthy profit growth. But let's talk cash flow. The actual cash coming in and out, free cash flow for Q2 was $1.9 billion. That's actually down a bit from $2.2 billion last year. Why the dip, especially with sales up?
Yeah, that's a good catch. It seems counterintuitive, but it's mostly down to a couple of things. First, the timing of some 2024 tax payments that got deferred and were paid this quarter.
Okay, timing.
Right. And second, higher capital expenditures. They're investing more back into the business. But it's worth noting their core business performance did help offset some of that decrease.
Got it. So tax timing and investments. What about the balance sheet? Debt, cash?
They're actively managing their debt. They retired $1.4 billion of debt just in Q2.
Okay.
And actually $4.3 billion so far this year. They also didn't repurchase any shares this quarter.
Interesting.
Yeah. So as of June 30th, they had about $8.0 billion in cash and cash equivalents, and their total debt stood at $56.2 billion.
Okay, so managing debt seems like a priority.
Yeah.
But with all this in mind, what are they telling us about the full year? What's this 2025 guidance look like?
They've set their total revenue guidance in the range of $35.0 to $36 billion.
Mm-hmm.
On the earnings side, GAAP EPS is projected between $10.97 and $12.11, and non-GAAP EPS between $20.20 and $21.30. They're also planning for capital expenditures around $2.3 billion for the year and said share repurchases won't exceed $500 million.
All right, thanks for that outlook. Now let's pivot a bit and talk about the products themselves. 15 products showing double-digit growth is pretty impressive. Which ones were the real stars this quarter?
Yeah, it's quite a list. Repatha, their cholesterol drug, jumped 31% to $696 million. That was driven by, get this, 36% volume growth.
Wow, huge volume again.
Exactly. Evenity, for osteoporosis, was up 32% to $518 million, also mainly volume. UPL-Azeno, that's for NOSD, it just soared 91% growth to $176 million, driven by 79% volume.
Incredible growth, though.
It really is. Then you have Blinsui 2 in oncology, up 45% to $384 million. Tezspire for severe asthma climbed 46% to $342 million. And Tavneos for vasculitis increased 55% to $110 million. all primarily volume-driven growth.
That's a strong lineup. But it wasn't all growth, was it? Some established products face some challenges.
That's right. You always have puss and takes in a big portfolio. Prolia, their big bone density drug, actually saw sales decrease 4% to $1.1 billion,
Why was that?
mostly due to lower net selling prices.
Yeah.
And they're bracing for more pressure there because biosimilar competition is set to launch in the U.S. in the second half of this year.
Ah, the biosimilar impact? Is that hitting XGV too?
Yes, similar story, though slightly different drivers. XGV sales decreased 5% to $532 million. That was due to unfavorable sales deductions and a bit of volume decline. And yes, like Prolia, biosimilars are expected to start eroding sales in the second half of 2025.
Okay, biosimilars are definitely a factor. Any other major decreases?
The most significant one was Ambrel, their anti-inflammatory drug. Sales dropped quite a bit, 34% to $604 million.
34%. What happened there?
It's kind of a complex mix. There were about 20% unfavorable changes in estimated sales deductions, plus a 19% lower net selling price.
Oof.
Yeah. A lot of that is down to an increased mix in the 340B program, that's the federal drug pricing program,
Right.
and also the impact of the U.S. Medicare Part D redesign, which changes how rebates and costs are handled.
So policy and pricing program impacts hitting hard there.
Definitely. What's interesting, though, is even with all that pressure, Ambrel volume actually grew by 3%.
Huh, so people are still using it, but the net revenue is down sharply.
Exactly. And just to round it out, their ultra-rare product segment saw a small decrease, 2%, also due to lower net selling prices.
Okay. Any other products worth mentioning quickly? Maybe some positives.
Sure. Otezla for psoriasis actually did well, up 14% to $618 million, helped by favorable sales deductions and volume growth.
Good to see.
And some newer products are starting to contribute meaningfully.
Mm-hmm.
Pavi-Bilu brought in $130 million, and Wheezlana added $35 million this quarter.
Okay.
And Imdeltra, their new oncology drug, is gaining traction fast, $134 million in sales, which is a 65% increase just from the previous quarter, driven by volume.
All right, that leads us nicely into the R&D pipeline. Let's talk about the future. And one name that keeps coming up is Maritide, AMG 133. This sounds like it could be huge in the obesity and metabolic space.
Oh, absolutely. Maritide is definitely a major focus. It's interesting because it activates GLP-1 but antagonizes TIPR. It works on two key metabolic pathways.
Right, and the phase 2 results they shared in June sounded pretty impressive.
They really were. They showed up to around 20% average weight loss in people with obesity but without type 2 diabetes, and up to about 17% in those who do have type 2 diabetes.
That's significant weight loss.
Very. And what's fascinating is that they didn't see a weight loss plateau by 52 weeks. That suggests there could be potential for even more reduction.
Yeah. Sustained effect. What about other markers? Diabetes control? Heart health?
Yeah, strong results there too. Robust, sustained reduction in HbA1c up to 2.2%, which is great for diabetes control.
Yeah.
And improvements in things like waist circumference, blood pressure, lipids, all important cardiometabolic measures.
And tolerability. That's always key with these GLP-1 type drugs.
Right. Is generally consistent with the class.
Yeah.
GI side effects like nausea were the most common, but mostly mild to moderate. Importantly, they were less frequent when the dose was escalated gradually.
Okay.
And the discontinuation rates due to those GI side effects were actually lower in the dose escalation arms, up to about 7.8%, which is encouraging.
So looking ahead, phase 3 is moving full steam.
Absolutely. 4 phase 3 studies are already enrolling. Maritime 1 and Megadis 2 for obesity, Maritime CV looking at cardiovascular outcomes, and Maritime HF focusing on heart failure.
Wow, comprehensive program.
And they're even planning another phase 3 study for obstructive sleep apnea starting in the second half of this year. So yeah, Maritide is definitely one to watch closely.
For sure. Now, another exciting one, particularly in oncology, is Amgen. You mentioned its sales growth. It's the first FDA-approved DLL3 targeting BiTE molecule for small cell lung cancer, right?
That's correct. A real breakthrough for a very tough cancer. And the recent phase 3 data, the interim results from the Delphi 304 trial, were quite remarkable.
What did they share?
Imdeltra reduced the risk of death by 40%. 40%.
Wow.
And it significantly extended median overall survival by more than 5 months, 13.6 months, versus 8.3 months for standard chemotherapy.
That's critically very meaningful.
Absolutely. Plus, it improved patient-reported outcomes, things like shortness of breath and cough. So they're moving forward with regulatory filings based on this.
Great news for patients. Okay, sticking with cancer, you mentioned bemarituzumab earlier.
Yes, another positive development. The phase 3 Fortitude 101 trial hit its primary endpoint. It showed a statistically significant and clinically meaningful improvement in overall survival for patients with gastric or gastroesophageal junction cancer who have a specific genetic marker, FGFR2b overexpression.
Addressing another difficult cancer type. Good.
Huh.
What else is moving in the pipeline, maybe outside oncology?
Well, Tepezza, for thyroid eye disease, just got marketing authorization approval from the European Commission in June. So that expands its reach significantly.
Good for European patients.
Definitely. And there's lots more ongoing.
Yeah.
For Repatha, there are still major cardiovascular outcome studies running, phase 3 and phase 4.
Okay.
Olpasiran, that's their SERENA, targeting LPA. A big cardiovascular risk factor, has its phase 3 outcome study, OCEAN-A outcomes, ongoing.
Right. LPA is getting a lot of attention.
It is. Then there's UPNA-Zine, which we mentioned for NOSD. Its FDA review for another condition, generalized myasthenia gravis, is underway, with a decision expected by December 14th this year.
Okay. Potential label expansion there.
Exactly. Tezspire, for asthma, is enrolling 2 phase 3 studies for COPD now. And results from its Wayfinder study showed it helps severe asthma patients reduce or even stop oral steroids.
That's a big deal for those patients.
Huge quality of life impact. Rocatini-Lyme for atopic dermatitis has over 3,300 patients enrolled in its phase 3 ROCKET program. We should see data readouts in the second half of 2025.
Wow. Busy pipeline. Anything else quickly?
Yeah, Blincyto in oncology has promising subcutaneous data in BL and a phase 3 study ongoing. And Lumakras Lamicras got its 3rd FDA breakthrough therapy designation, this time for first-line colorectal cancer in a specific combination. Oh, and Nplate met its endpoint in a phase 3 study for chemotherapy-induced thrombocytopenia. So, yeah, a lot happening.
Definitely a packed pipeline.
Okay.
Let's shift gears now to the external environment. Beyond the science and the sales, what macro factors are impacting Amgen?
Well, like pretty much every global company, they're dealing with ongoing macroeconomic uncertainty. Inflation, fluctuating interest rates, geopolitical tensions.
The usual suspects.
Right. And all these things contribute to rising healthcare costs generally and put pressure on drug pricing specifically.
And speaking of pressure, what about the regulatory and policy side? Especially here in the U.S., we hear a lot about the IRA, for instance.
Yeah, the policy headwinds are significant. We're definitely seeing the continued impact of the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, and also the 340B program.
How is the IRA hitting them directly?
Well, 2 key products, Otezla and NBREL, have actually been selected by CMS for Medicare price setting. That starts in 2027 for Otezla and 2026 for Enbrel.
So direct price negotiations coming for those two.
Exactly. That's a direct hit on future revenues. Then there's the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, OBBA, which was enacted July 4th this year. That's going to change the international tax framework starting in 2026.
More complexity on the tax front.
Yes. And things like the Most Favored Nations, or MFN, executive order, and the subsequent letters signal this continued push from the government towards lower drug prices.
What about at the state level?
We're seeing activity there, too. Some states are setting up prescription drug affordability boards, PDABs, which can potentially set price caps. And there are drug importation programs being explored.
How does that affect Amgen?
Right now, those importation programs mainly impact small molecule drugs, so biologics are currently exempt. But it's another layer of potential pressure. It all adds up to a really dynamic and, frankly, challenging pricing environment.
Absolutely. And finally, no discussion of a major pharma company is complete without touching on litigation. It seems like they're navigating quite a few legal battles.
Yes, the legal landscape is always complex in this industry. How these battles play out definitely shapes their strategy and potential liabilities.
What are some of the key ones to watch?
Okay, well, probably the most financially significant right now is the Regeneron antitrust class action.
Yeah.
A jury actually found for Regeneron.
Oh, really? What was the outcome?
They awarded $135.6 million in compensatory damages. But that's potentially subject to troubling under antitrust law, and there were punitive damages too, so it could reach over $400 million.
Wow, that's substantial.
It is. Now, Amgen strongly disagrees, believes the verdict isn't consistent with the law or evidence. They haven't accrued for it yet, and they're planning post-trial motions and potential appeals. But the outcome is uncertain, and it's a material risk.
Okay, definitely one to follow. What about patent fights, especially around biosimilars?
Right. Lots of activity there. They have ongoing repatent cases against Regeneron Sanofi in Germany, the EU's Unified Patent Court, and Japan. Just recently, a German division of the UPC ruled a Regeneron patent was valid, but importantly not infringed by Amgen. Appeals are happening, of course.
So defending their blockbusters.
Exactly. And for Prolia and Xgevia, they reached a confidential settlement with Accord, which allows Accord's biosimilars to launch as early as October 1st this year.
So that biosimilar competition is definitely coming soon for those two.
It is. But Amgen isn't standing still. They filed new lawsuits against other biosimilar developers like Henlius, Hikma, and Biocon, asserting infringement of numerous patents, trying to block or delay their entry.
Okay. Any other patent cases?
Yes, Regeneron also filed a suit alleging infringement related to PayVBLU, one of their newer products. And then there's the big one, the IRS tax dispute.
Ah, yes, the long-running tax issue. Where does that stand?
They're still firmly contesting the IRS notices for the 2010, 2012, and 2013-2015 periods. The IRS is proposing additional taxes of roughly $3.6 billion and $5.1 billion for those periods, plus about $2 billion in penalties.
Huge numbers.
Massive. It's mostly about how profits were allocated between the U.S. and Puerto Rico. The trial wrapped up back in January 2025, but a decision isn't expected until the second half of 2026 at the earliest.
A long wait for that outcome.
Yes, and audits for 2016-2018 involving similar issues are also ongoing, so it's a major financial uncertainty hanging over them.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, it sounds like Amgen delivered a pretty strong quarter financially, driven by volume, and they have some really exciting things in the pipeline, especially Maritide and the oncology advancements.
That's right. Solid performance, real innovation happening.
But at the same time, they're facing significant headwinds, aren't they? Biosimilar competition is becoming very real for key products. The policy landscape with IRA and OBBA is shifting under their feet, and they're juggling some very high-stakes, complex legal battles, especially that Regeneron antitrust case and the IRS dispute.
Exactly. It's that classic balancing act in biotech, pushing the science forward while managing intense external pressures.
So the final thought for you, our listener: what really stands out to you about Amgen's position right now? How do you see this balance playing out between the amazing scientific potential and these increasing market policy and legal pressures?
Yeah, how will that dynamic shape the future, not just for Amgen, but for all the major players in this industry? It's really the core question, isn't it?